Hey guys, in this video I'm going to show you how to use the explosion Photoshop action. So this is the stock photo I'll use to demonstrate the effect, and this is what the action creates. It creates, well, basically everything you see there, real epic explosion behind your subject, and everything's layered. You've got full control to move everything around. So I'll go through how to adjust the look after the action's finished. I'll go through all the layers, but I'll show you a few more examples that I've got of the effect. Okay, let's get into it. I'll close that down, close this. Okay, so there's a few things I just need to go through with you to check off to make sure that your file is set up correctly and you don't get any errors. So firstly, look into your layer panel and make sure that your photo layer is set correctly as the background, so it should look identical to this. Generally, it won't look like that if you've opened up a photo with a transparent background, like a PNG. So for example, say I just open up my photo, it's called layer 1, okay, I need to set that correctly as the background. So I'll go to layer, new, background from layer, and you can see that's set it all up. So still in the layer panel, go to the top right hand corner icon here, click on that. It's chopped off on my screen, but click on that and go scroll down to the bottom and select panel options. And right down the bottom here, just make sure add copy to copy layers and groups is selected and click OK. Next, go to image mode, make sure your photo's in RGB color mode and 8-bit to channel. And also with any photo effect action, make sure that that you're using a high resolution photo. So you can see mine here is 1600 by 2500. I found with testing this action, it's best to use photos in the range of 2000 to say 4000 pixels. So, you know, if you open up your photo and say 1200 pixels, scale it up a little bit. You shouldn't lose too much quality. But yeah, try to work with high resolution photos. Okay, cancel that. So what I need to do now is, basically I need to fill in my subject with a color, okay? So to do that, first I'm going to create a new layer. So go to layer, new layer, and this must be called brush, all lowercase. The action won't work at all if you don't create this step, okay? So do that. So I've got my layer called brush, and basically with this layer selected, I want to fill in my subject with any color, okay? So what I'm going to do, I'm just going to select my background, and I'm just going to grab my wand tool, okay, magic wand tool. Because my subject's quite heavily contrasted against the background, I should be able to just click around here and select the background. You can see it's not cutting into my subject, which is what I want. Okay, so now if I select my brush layer, and if I fill this selection with a color, so to fill a selection with your foreground color, you hold down Alt Delete or Option Delete. But you can see that's filled the background. I want it to fill my subject, so I need to invert that selection. So Control Shift I or Command Shift I, okay, Alt Delete or Option Delete, and that will now fill in the subject. Okay, I've missed a little bit here, so what I might do is I'll just grab my pen tool, hit P, and I'm just going to roughly go around the edges of this. Oops. Okay, that'll do. I'll zoom back out. Okay, so I've got my brush layer. I have outlined my subject. Okay, and if your subject isn't heavily contrasted against the background, you can't get away with the wand tool. Just just hit B on the keyboard, grab a soft brush, and start brushing over your subject. There's a lot of ways you can trace around your subject. delete that. Okay. So what I need to do now is load up the brushes that were included with the download. It's a very important step. So if you hit B on the keyboard or go over here and select the brush tool, okay. If you right click anywhere over the canvas, it'll bring up your brush panel. And what I need to do now is click on this icon here and go to replace brushes. Alright. And just double click on the explosion brushes.abr file that was included in the download, and you'll see now I've got all the brushes loaded into the panel, which is what I want. Next I need to load up the actions panel. So go to Window, Actions, it'll pop up to the side here, and go to this top right hand corner icon and go to Load Actions, select explosion.atn, okay, and the action is here. So if you open the action here, you can see all the steps, and when I play the action you'll notice that the scroll bar goes down, so to give you an indication of how much time the action has got to go to play back. So before you play the action, always make sure that your brush opacity is at 100%. Okay, so if you hit B to activate your brush tool, just make sure that the opacity is 100%. Okay, with any action that involves using brushes to create the effects, you always need to make sure it's at 100%. And also a good habit to get into before playing any action is just to clear out any history. So if you go to Edit, Purge, All, that'll just wipe out any history banked up in Photoshop. Okay, so the action's ready to go now. There's going to be a pop-up pretty much as soon as I play the action, which I'll explain what that's all about. So if you just select the explosion action here, I'm just going to click play. Okay, and you get this pop-up almost immediately. It says, in the next step, start brushing over your photo where you want the explosion to appear. The explosion will expand outwards from the area that you brush. Note, a suitable brush will already be selected in this next step, so all you need to do is start brushing. After you have brushed onto your photo, click play in the actions panel to resume the action playback. If you need help with the step, just check back to this video. Click stop below to proceed. So I'm going to click stop, and you'll notice that the action has stopped playing back, and what we need to do now is very simply start brushing over our photo, and that's going to be the area where our explosion appears. So the brush will already be selected, so you don't need to do anything but start clicking around over your photo and brushing. Okay, so I want a fairly big explosion. So down here. Okay, and so just think of where your brush as being the heart of the explosion, like the bright point, and the explosion will expand outwards from that area. Okay, so that is not the exact radius, that is just pretty much the heart of the explosion, and it'll go outwards. Okay, and don't worry about the color. I've made sure the action selects a red for you, so that's all you need to do is start brushing, and when you're finished, just click play on the action and the action will continue. It's that simple. And it's going to now take about a minute to play back, and it will create all the effects for us. So I'm just going to skip the video ahead to get to the end of the action, and I'll go through every single layer so that you get really familiar with how it all works, and yeah, you can have a lot of fun with it. Alright, the action's finished playing back, took around a minute, and you can see all the effects it's created. Alright, so I'm just going to collapse this actions panel and jump into the layer panel now. Okay, so the first thing you want to do with any one of my actions is collapse all the folders that are open. So you can see everything's open, so it's a little bit messy. And to do that, the explosion folder will already be selected. So just hold down Control Alt or Command Option and click on this arrow next to the folder. Click on that, and it collapses all the folders for you. Alright, now if you want to run the action again, say you want to try brushing a different area for the explosion, just delete the explosion folder. Okay, I've left the brush layer on at the top here, so all you need to do then is simply just click on the explosion action and click play again. Alright, undo that. Okay, so I'll start from the top. I'll just go down from the top to the bottom, talk about all the layers. So this top one here, it just adds a little bit of fine sharpening over your design. Okay, and any layer that I've got where it's got brackets opacity, I'm basically telling you to experiment with that layer through the opacity. So if you look at the opacity of this layer here, it's at 50%. So if you just click on the word opacity and drag to the left and right, you can see it adjusts the amount. You probably won't see on this particular layer, but when I drag from 0 to 100, you can see the sharpening increase. So just by default, I've got that at 50%. Overall contrast, opacity, okay, if I adjust the opacity of this layer, okay, it just boosts the contrast, but it doesn't boost the contrast so much of your subject. It really attacks the explosion around it. So you can see this adjustment layer here has got a mask. You can see this mask here. So if I hold down Alt or Option and click to go inside the mask, you can see anywhere in white is where that layer is going to affect our design. Anywhere in black it's not going to. So you can see that I've only got it affecting our subject just a little bit. You can see that black. Okay, so if you want it to affect your subject completely, you can hold down Shift, click on the mask, that'll disable it. So now when I adjust the opacity, you can see it starts to attack our subject. If I turn it on and off, you can see that working. So I'm just going to leave that about there. Okay, so explosion brightness, if you double click on this layer here, okay, you get this curve. And this is basically controlling how bright the middle of our explosion is. So if you just grab this middle handle here, if I drag this down, you can see it really flattens out the brightness. Okay, so you really just want to experiment with dragging that around and get to something that you might prefer. It might suit your design much brighter. Okay, but I've tried to find a good point that works well across lots of different photos. So, and this one here, try dragging this one down. Okay, you can see it works in a similar way. So play around with those two handles. I'll just leave that about there. Background brightness. So if you double click on this one, okay, and down the bottom here you've got these two handles. Now this white one here, if I drag this to the right, you'll see it's going to brighten up our background. If I drag it to the left, it's going to darken it. But it's going to only darken everywhere around the explosion. So you can see that again through the mask here. Okay, so everywhere in white, this layer is going to affect. Everywhere in black, it's not going to touch. Okay, I might just play around with this a bit, make it a bit darker. Color options. If you go inside this folder here, I've just set up some basic color options here. You've got 4 different folders. By default, I've applied the red, a red explosion. Okay, and the way that you switch between these colors, if you just turn the eye off for this folder, go down and turn the other ones on. Okay, it's that simple. If you go inside these folders, you've just got some layers to play around with. So you've got the shadow color, the main color, some color toning, and a photo filter layer. So if you want to play around with these, just double click on that box, and you can change between different colors. That way, color toning. It's just a curves adjustment layer. You can go into any one of these color channels and play around with these handles here. Okay, so they're all open to experimenting with. Now, a few things to note about the way I've set this up. Firstly, on the color options folder, okay, I've made sure if I hold down Alt or Option, click on that mask, go inside, I've made sure that the red doesn't completely fill our subject. So you can see a little bit of grey there. Okay, but everywhere else it's going to apply the red. Alright, so if I hold down Shift, I'll just disable that. So you can see that red then intersecting with our subject. So I've just made sure that it keeps towards the center of your subject. It reveals more of the original color. Okay, and with the mask on these folders here, what you want to do is play around with the levels. So you can see it's applying a lot of the red here where it's bright white and not so much red down here. Okay, but if I hold down Control, Alt or Command, Option, L to bring up the levels, Okay, and you can play around with, say, this one here. You can make the adjustment layer brightness. So if you look at the adjustment layer here, where I drag this handle around, see how it's making it brighter? And if you look at the design, as I make it brighter, it brings in more of the red. Now you can make it darker, so that way it's added a lot more contrast. So now the red is only really going to appear up the top here. Okay. So this layer here is the one I always jump to straight away. As soon as the action's finished, I go to this layer. It's called Reveal Normal Photo, and I've got in brackets Brush Mask. So if I turn this layer on and off, it does nothing, because the layer mask is completely black, so it's hiding our layer. Now, if I just hold down Shift, I'll just disable the mask. You see, all that I've done here is put your original cutout. Okay, I've put it on top of everything else, so you'll see that there's none of these broken up bits. None of the light passes through to him. It sits on top of everything. So if you run the action and you get some parts over your subject's face, like there is here, maybe there's too much glow crossing over your subject's face, you use this layer here to reveal the original photo. So if I grab a white brush, okay, because I want to reveal this layer, I'll select the mask. If I just brush over his face, you'll see how that's, okay, so I'll just hide that layer and show it again. You can see that it's gotten rid of the glow and all those bits are over his face. Okay, and you can use that not just for his face, say like his hand here disappears a bit, so I can just brush white over his hand, this one here, so you know, it makes it look like it's sort of extending out from all these clouds and stuff, and you can see here it gets brighter, so it goes inside it a bit. So you can play around with that. That's a very important layer. This folder here, Sparks, if I turn it on and off, you can see what they are. And the two that I only really play around with, if you go inside this folder, is Spark 4 and 3. So if I move these two around, you can see it's all those those sparks there. So if I grab number 4, I can move that around wherever I want. Like that. 3. Okay, and you can rotate these as well. So I can just go, Control or Command T. I can scale it up if I want, rotate it around, however you want to place it. And why not create more if you want more sparks? So if I just hold down Alt or Option and click and drag up in the actions in the layer panel, that'll just create a copy. So now I can hit Control or Command T. I'll scale it down, rotate it, move it up. So I've just created more sparks. What I might do, I'll place that there. Something like that, looks pretty good. Okay. And don't forget, you can, these other layers here, they're just those subtle sparks. You can duplicate them, move them around to create more, or you can just duplicate the entire folder, Control J or Command J. That'll also make the sparks a lot brighter. So clouds, if I turn that on and off, you see what that is. So if you don't want any clouds, you just want the bright light with all these broken up pieces, you can just turn the clouds folder off. Okay, if you go inside here, I've got 6 different layers here to play around with. And what I sometimes like to do is just turn the layer on and off and just see how it affects the design, because sometimes I prefer it, it really depends on your photo and what you're trying to achieve. But yeah, you turn it on and off, and you might prefer the design with that layer turned off. So that looks pretty cool. I could also lower the opacity. Currently this one's at 70%, so I can just drag that down. I'll just drag it down a bit. Okay, and you can also play around with adjusting the layer order of these. So I can, drag this one down here, drag that one up there. It's not really doing much, but it'll change, depending on your photo. Those results will vary. So that's that. You can duplicate the entire folder. That'll create yeah, a lot more clouds. You can adjust the opacity of that folder. Okay, so lots you can do there. Soften background opacity. So if currently this one's at 60%, if I drag it to 0 and 100, basically what this does, if you look down the bottom half of the design here, as I adjust this opacity from 0 to 100, basically anywhere outside of the explosion area, it's going to apply a blur to the background, so it actually helps create a bit more focus on our explosion and our subject. And you can see that through the mask again. Okay, so this is it's not going to touch this area here, but everywhere around it, you know, it's going to add some blurring. So if you don't want any blurring, just drag it to 0. But I often find that, you know, just add a little bit can add a lot. So, you know, I'll leave that around 70%. So shatter parts, they're all the explosion pieces, whatever you want to call it. If you don't want them, turn them off. Okay, and if another way to control, say if I don't want any of these parts over his body, again I can just use the mask. Oops. I'll just select that mask. I'll grab a black brush. You know, wherever I start brushing now, I can just erase. Okay. If you go inside here, there's just, you know, a bunch of different layers. If you want to heat more broken up parts, just, you know, I can just duplicate the entire folder, Control J, Command J. I can start moving these around. Okay, try rotate them a bit so it doesn't look like it's just being, that layer's just been copied. You know, I can flip it horizontal. Whatever you want to go for. So it's too much for what I want here, so I'm just going to delete it. And another thing I like to try, well, a few things you can do here. You can lower the opacity of the folder so it looks like it's kind of sinking away. You know, it's more sitting behind all these glows and sparks. So there's 100%. I also like to experiment with moving this folder around. So if I drag this, I often like to drag it below this edge glow wide folder in between here, so it sort of blends in a bit more with the background. But yeah, you can just achieve a similar thing by just lowering the opacity like that. So I'm going to lower it a bit. Okay, I'm just going to move this folder around, see if there's a position I like better. I'll just leave it there. Okay, now this layer here, light bleeds brush mask. Again, the layer mask is black, so by default the layer's not going to do anything. I'll hold down shift on that mask, and you see that all it's doing is filling in our subject with this sort of this white glow. Okay, so that's pretty useless if you use a layer like that. But the way I like to use it is if I hit B, I'll grab my white brush because I want to start revealing this layer. Okay, I'll select the mask, and if I just like pick a hot spot around the edges of my subject, say here on his belt, if I just brush, to adjust the size of your brush, just use the left and right square brackets. Okay, so here's a hot spot here, so I'll just brush there, and you can see it makes it look like the light is passing into our subject a bit more. So if I turn this layer on and off, you can see that there. So what I like to do is just, you know, pick the hot spots, like here. I'll brush there, so you can see the light then passes further in. And if you want to adjust the opacity of where you brush, so I'm just going to undo that. Oops, undo those two. Say if I if I brush here, and I'm thinking, oh, that's a bit too strong, I just want to lower the opacity, you can go to Edit, Fade Brush Tool, or Shift Control F. So I'll just go Shift Control F, and you've got this fade option, so then I can just fade the amount of that brush like that. Okay, so I'll just brush here, Control Shift F, lower that down a little bit. Alright, so that's a cool one to play around with. Now, edge glow wide, if I turn this on and off, I actually start with edge glow narrow. I'll just turn that off for the moment. So edge glow narrow, this folder here just adds you know, a glow around the edge of your subject, the area that you brush. Okay, it just helps the blend between your subject and the background. Just helps those two sort of come together a bit better. Okay, so all I like to really do with this folder is play around with the opacity. Okay, if it's too bright, you just lower it down. And I find 99% of the time that, you know, it's pretty good with where it is. Edge glow wide is similar to narrow. It just spreads the glow out a lot further. So you can see as I turn that on and off. Okay, if that's too bright, lower the opacity. So I'll just bring that down a fraction, 73%. Okay, I won't bother going into all these layers here. You can play around with them, but I never really adjust these. I just adjust the main folder here. Main photo, turn that on and off. That is, yeah, the main photo. And you can see that this little bit is, you know, his hands here and his head are sticking around. Why? Because we use this layer here, reveal normal photo, okay? And because this layer is stacked on top of everything else, this is going to always be more prominent, okay? So you can see that there. You can see these faint little lines here, these outlines, okay? If you're not wanting that, that's coming from the sharpening layer, so you can just turn that off, okay? But I'll leave it on for the moment. Go inside main photo folder and I'll talk about these layers. So add strong highlights, brush mask. Again, this layer is hidden. If I hold down shift, click on it, you see all this layer does, it really it boosts up the brightness of the highlights in your photo. And the way I like to use this is just brush on, you know, I look at where the light passes into our subject, and I'll grab a white brush here and I'll just brush a little bit, you know, I'll brighten up the areas where the light comes in. So, you know, around here, I'll start brushing. Around here, I'll just brighten up that area. Around here. So now if I turn this layer on and off, you can see where I've just targeted those particular areas to make them a bit brighter. You know, if it's too strong, I just lower the opacity a bit. You know, but out there. Sharpen details, just adds a little bit of sharpening to your subject. Don't really need to play around with this one. Add contrast. Just adds a little bit of contrast, more towards the center of your subject. You can see that I've blurred out the selection, so yeah. Darken photo, pretty simple. I've just flattened the, sort of crushed the highlights down a bit on your subject. Okay, main photo, pretty simple. Not really too much you need to do in this folder, but I always like to play around with this one here. Main light, opacity, if I turn this off, you can see that that is the main light in the center of our explosion. You can adjust the opacity of this again. So as you can see, there's a few different ways to control the brightness of the explosion. Backing plate, this one you don't really ever need to touch. I had to create this layer, you know, particularly for photos where the background is white. Okay, I won't go into too much detail how that works. You just don't really need to touch it. It's just so that the action, the effect looks accurate across different coloured backgrounds, basically. Darken background just adds a little bit of, yeah, darkening to the background. Don't really need to play around with that one. And there's our original photo, untouched. Now, if you want to export your design on a transparent background, okay, so all you need to do is turn off, you know, the darkened background and the background layer. Okay, so you can see the transparency is then revealed. You want to also turn off overall sharpening, okay, because that adds a little bit of a grey overtone. And any other layer that's casting a grey tone you can turn off, so the softened background layer will do that as well. but you should be able to just, export how that is anyway, and you can brush away any details you don't want when you drop it onto your other designs. Okay, what else can we do here? So what I also like to do is I always like to fiddle around with, when I think I've got something that looks good, I always jump back into the folders and keep moving them around, because you never know if you're going to get a better combination of things. And I also like to play around with the colors again when I'm done. I also like to, I'll go to the top of the layer order here, and I might create another curves layer. Okay, and I'll just jump in these channels, and I might want to add a little bit more green to the shadows. Go into the blue channel, maybe a little bit. Just play around, just tweak. I think I've got it looking pretty good anyway. I'll turn it on and off. I'll just use a tiny little bit of that curves layer. Okay, now another thing I like to do is, when I'm pretty happy with the overall design, I'll flatten the design onto one layer. So Control Shift Alt E, or Command Shift Option E, and what that'll do, it will put everything you see on the canvas onto one layer. So you can see at the top of the layer order here, if I move this layer around, I've got my design on one layer. So now I can do things like dodging and burning, for example. So if I go over here, you got the dodge and your burn tool. The burn tool will basically darken any area of your photo, and if you go to the range here, you can select what sort of color range you want to target. So if I want to darken the midtones, I'll select the midtones, and when I start brushing, you can see how that's just darkening where I'm brushing. So if you want to target the shadows, switch it over. Okay, and the same with, you can target the highlights. Grab the dodge tool, that'll make areas brighter. Okay, and that is essentially it. It's that simple to use. The key is to just jump into all these folders and layers and just experiment, move things around, duplicate them, rotate them, just have fun. So I will just flick this on and off between that and the original. Okay. If you've got any questions, if you're having trouble with the action, just let me know and I'll help you out. But if not, have fun using it. Thanks.